direction to go. So we're probably in the early to mid 60s in terms of when this was written. What is it that Luke is trying to achieve? He's trying to lay the groundwork for the reconciliation between peoples, between Jew and Gentile, and the salvation view that is corporate, not just individual. He's explaining how salvation is for all people. It's for all people in pulling them together. And the Jews and the Gentiles had a very problematic history. The Maccabean War, which had taken place in 167 to 164 BC, was an attempt by Gentiles, by Syrians actually, to wipe Judaism off the face of the earth. And the sense of estrangement was huge. Yet the gospel was saying God, in reconciling individual people to himself, is also reconciling groups to themselves so that the church becomes Jew and Gentile in one body. Ephesians chapter 2 tells us this. And in that reconciliation is part of the corporate work that God is doing. There's also something else that God is doing, and that is he is pulling together these estranged groups into this unit that he has made, this new unit in Christ. And in doing that, he's showing that part of the purpose of salvation is not just to affect our individual relationship with God, but our relationship to one another. Finally, another important thing is that Luke is writing for a new religious movement in an era in which religion was respected because of its age, not because of its newness. It's unlike our modern world. In the modern world, we want to have, Microsoft Word 2022 and 2021. In the ancient world with religion, what's old is better. So you had this new boy on the block, and you need to explain how this new boy on the block is actually quite old. So one of the things Luke is going to do in his gospel is to show how the exercise of Jesus' ministry is part of a program and a plan that God had from long ago, dating back all the way to David and all the way back to Abraham and covenantal commitments that God made long ago. So what appears to be new is actually quite old. This plan of bringing Jew and Gentile together in one body is something that God designed from long ago. And so what looks to be new is actually quite old. It's part of a program that God has in mind. This mixture of Jew and Gentile, which would be, from a social point of view in that time, controversial and unusual, was part of what God was doing to bring humanity back together, not just with the living God, but to bring humanity back together in relationship to one another at the same time. Luke opens with a prologue. That's actually different, except for the Gospel of John, from the other Gospels. Matthew opens with genealogies, and Mark just dives right into the ministry of John the Baptist after a heading. John has a prologue, but his prologue goes from before the foundations of the world. Luke's prologue is unique. It tells us how and why he went about writing the gospel that he does. And so these 4 verses are very, very important in framing everything that happens in the Gospels. In the first 2 verses, we get the source of testimony about Jesus. There's written testimony in verse 1, and there are oral sources and eyewitnesses in verse 2. And then in the rest of the section, we get a discussion about why Luke joined this testimony that has existed. Let's listen to these verses because they're, as I said, very, very important. It says, "Now many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us." That fulfillment at the end of verse 1 is important, and that undertaken to compile an account in the Greek actually refers to literally setting something to hand, which means we're talking about written sources in verse 1. But they're also connected to other sources. It says, like the accounts passed on to us, that's technical language for oral tradition, the passing on by voice, because most of what was recorded in this time wasn't written down. It was passed on by word of mouth and in some cases through official channels. Like the accounts passed on to us by those who are eyewitnesses and servants of the word. That's the official channels that I was alluding to. So they are eyewitnesses who experience what is being discussed on the one hand, and they were serving the word, the message that comes out of it as a result. And they were with Jesus from the beginning, which means that they were eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.